Very excited today to have, I'm going to say it, the biggest guest we've ever had on the podcast. It's Jourdan Rodrigue, the senior writer from The Athletic, has covered the Rams in detail for many years and a lot of other NFL coverage as well. Star on the Heed the Call podcast, the NFL Daily podcast, and all sorts of other things. Jourdan, thank you for joining me all the way from LA.
Thank you for having me. We were just talking offline for a minute just about, first of all, how badly I would like to come to Australia next year. And second of all, how exciting and cool it is, the Heed the Call guys and NFL Daily, and then previously the Around the NFL podcast, just the connections, the people who I've gotten to meet just through those guys, and how awesome a bridge that they've created to parts of the world that, maybe football is not the first sport, but have such a passion for it. So I'm really excited to be on with you today. It's going to be fun. I mean, what else, it's not like anything's happening in Ramsland right now. Right?
Not much at all. I mean, let's get straight into that. Well, in a second, but you're right. The Around the NFL podcast, I mean, that is how I got into the NFL. I didn't used to watch it much 6 or 7 years ago. I sort of had a peripheral interest in it. And then I found that pod, and before you know it, I became obsessed and started my own with a couple of friends. So let's get into the Ram stuff. I mean, you have covered them intimately for years. You are you're an insider. You know what's going on, and you are all over the news of the Matt Stafford restructure. So can you break that down for lay people like myself? How did they actually get it done? What does it mean? And what's the vibe in Ramsland now?
Yeah, so we have to actually go back an entire year to really talk about this the way that it is necessary to be discussed, because this contract dispute is something that popped up last off season, when Matthew Stafford's camp saw that they were not drafting a quarterback in the first round to potentially replace him. And then the news leaked out that he was unhappy with his current contract, the extension he signed after leading the Rams to the Super Bowl in Los Angeles back during the 2021 season. So he signed that extension in 2022. Well, he outplayed that extension in 2023, played like a top 5 quarterback, and at that point ranked about top 15-ish in quarterback money. So coming into last offseason, this dragged out through the entirety of the summer into training camp, where Sean McVay basically got a compromise with Matthew while they were like locked in a room together on campus at Loyola Marymount, where the Rams held training camp practice, which stretched on for 3 hours into the first morning of report date. So Sean McVay got this done with Matthew at the 11th hour last season. Okay, well, they knew that based on the restructure that they gave him, which was basically taking all of his guaranteed money for 2025 or 2024, for 2025, and pushing it into the 2024 season on that contract, basically giving him a pay bump in that regard and making him feel respected, saying, okay, let's roll you back as our guy for the 2024 season. So again, leaving that door open for 2025 rediscussion. So we knew that this was coming, and we were like, well, how long is it going to take this time, right?
You had to at some point. You see all these teams pushing things down the road and pretending they never have to think about them, right?
Exactly. Just kick the can. It's fine. The NFL motto should be, we don't have to focus on the problem until it's staring us directly in the face. So this is fast forward. I know it just rings off the tongue. This year, we knew that this was going to come up. We knew that Matthew Stafford wanted a pay raise. There was no way he was going to play on his contract extension for the 2025 season as it currently exists. He only had $4 million in guarantees left. His cap number was only about $27 million, which would be very embarrassing for a quarterback of his status, right? So they revisited. They allowed his agent to talk with other teams, especially during the week of the NFL Scouting Combine, to figure out what his market actually looked like, and if a team would be willing, if it ultimately came to a trade, if a team would be willing to pay him a significant amount more. In this case, a couple of teams were ready, the Raiders and the Giants, to pay him deals with 2 years on it, guaranteed money of up to $110 million. So significantly more than where the Rams wanted to keep Matthew Stafford, which is on a year-to-year deal that kind of is around in the 40s, something like that. That's where they have preferred to stay previously. So all of this unfolds last week at Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. I'm scuttling around behind the scenes, like trying to lurk and get people to tell me things and all of this stuff. I'm working with a fantastic team of people at The Athletic who are doing the same thing. And eventually we come with the news of the offers. There was a very real chance that this did not work out in the Rams' favor. But again, late in the process, a meeting was scheduled between Sean McVay, and Matthew Stafford and a couple of others in the organization and Matthew's family as well for Friday morning at 6:30, because these are unhinged people who keep unhinged hours. And they knew the entire time that, like, we are open to getting it done. Both sides, we're open to getting it done. There's good vibes still between both sides. Everybody's been really communicative, which is amazing and rare for the NFL. And everybody still wants this to happen. If it can't happen, he has these two other offers sitting there ready to go. So they come together and then agree that he will be staying again on a sort of a year-to-year situation under his existing framework. And so the Rams kind of got what they wanted, and Matthew Stafford is poised to make a championship run again in 2025.
So when does this current contract end now?
2026.
Okay. And there was a very real possibility that he was going elsewhere. So it wasn't just for the headlines that he really was scouting out options, or was it all along really going to end up at the Rams?
So everybody wanted, I think both sides, including Matthew Stafford, I think everybody wanted him to stay in Los Angeles. But the significance of the offers from the Raiders and the Giants and the real framework and possibility that they could get this done, plus the fact that they were going to pay him much closer a number, those teams thought so much that this was possible and were given the impression that this was possible, that those offers manifested. That does not happen unless there is a real actual shot that this could happen. And so Sean McVay said, this week that, I never had a doubt. And I'm like, okay, bro, that's fine. I'm happy for you that you never had a doubt. That's great. You probably were so convinced that you would manifest this and this would happen your way. However, it is real that other teams thought there was a genuine chance that Matthew Stafford could be joining their roster.
Well, there was some real optimism amongst some of the Giants listeners to our show and elsewhere that, wow, we might be getting Stafford. And that started to build momentum. And then just like that, it was taken away when the announcement came out. So interesting to hear the other side and from the inside of the Rams. So that's one name. That's Stafford. Mm-hmm. And now we know as well, we heard a few weeks ago that Cooper Kupp is being traded by the team. Now, all of a sudden, I have heard a couple of whispers, could Kupp stay? Now that Stafford's back, can Kupp stay? Is there an offer forthcoming? What's happening? Is there a possibility that changes, or is he definitely gone? And how does that all play out?
What I would say with the Rams is never say never on literally anything, right? You just keep everything open with them at all times. They're a bit of a chaotic team, but they just try things and they try to figure things out as they go. And it's fascinating process, really. But with Cooper, I think the one telling sign here is that they have not had any conversations with him, whether it was way back weeks ago when they informed him they would try to trade him, to now that they have not talked about changing his contract at all. And the reason you don't do that is because you're making it very clear to another team that your first preference would be to trade him. That way, the other team can figure out how much of that contract they would like the Rams to take on, and they can sort of negotiate that sliding scale, a pick and a financial sum that way, versus inheriting a reworked contract that the Rams would have already taken X amount of money on and being sort of stuck in that regard. So that was the big sort of signal to me that their preference would still be to trade him. Now, it's a hard sentence to say, right? Because he has meant so much to the legacy of this organization. Nobody would ever forget 4th and 1 with the Super Bowl on the line. And, him and Matthew Stafford run a sweep that failed 3 times in practice when they tried it, and sustains a drive that ultimately wins the Super Bowl. Robert Woods' famous quote, because Cooper Kupp, crossed up Eli Apple, he called it applesauce. I mean, there's so many amazing defining moments that he had. And I think this is a Rams team, though, that has been kind of open about the fact that they would like everything now to flow through Puka Nacua, who is now the heir to this offense and also a player that they would like to continue to ascend in a leadership role and really have it be his locker room.
So with Puka as the clear number one now, we assume Kupp's gone. Are they looking for a veteran wide receiver too to duo with Nacua, or are they going to the draft? What do you think?
I really think they're going to look at every avenue. Sean was pretty open about that this week, which was a little bit surprising to hear him say, like, how aggressive they're planning on being at that position. Because it is, I guess, if you look at it from that perspective, it is kind of a partial overhaul, right? Because Cooper did so many things within that offense. So to me, I could see, honestly, on a cheap deal, I could see a guy like Devontae Adams being a fit. We know he wants to get back to the West Coast because Aaron Rodgers was legitimately a part of their backup plans should they not have been able to keep Matthew Stafford. They would have also had to ask themselves the question already, will we also take Davante Adams, and what is feasible with that? Because it's been made clear that Davante Adams would want to be a part of whatever Aaron Rodgers is doing next. I could see them being aggressive via trade. They have in the past for the right players. But really, I see them hitting the draft hard at this position. And I really do see there's a couple really exciting players who I think are fits we'll talk about in a minute. But like, it is, I think, one of those things where they're going to look in multiple phases of the offseason to kind of overhaul this position. Because like I said, the second Matthew Stafford said yes to coming back, it's truly my opinion that Super Bowl run clock started at 6:32 in the morning on Friday.
Yep. Well, we've been discussing on the show about if you're moving on Kupp only to get in a guy like Davante Adams, then I know there's some money issues there, and maybe that's the only reason. But it seems counterintuitive outside of that. Why not just make the Kupp thing work? But if it's a contract thing, then I sort of understand it. Well, let's look at the draft then. So wide receiver is potentially one area, but what's the greatest off-season need? Whether it's draft or free agency, where do the Rams need to go?
I think corner is a huge issue with them, but where I've often seen this team build is they'll pay one tier 2 to tier 1 corner. And in this case, Darius Williams did a really nice job last season for them. And then they will build the rest of the secondary around draft and develop safeties. They've hit on a couple, Cam Kinchins, Jalen McCullough, Cam Curl is still on the roster as well. He played well down the stretch last year. And then they will look for a later tier or young corner opposite of Darius Williams. And so I think Akella Witherspoon would still be in the mix for them. I think this is a really great free agency class, actually. If you need like tier 3 or 4 free agent safeties or corners, I think that this is a really good year to have those. Not a great free agency class anywhere else, but actually in that phase, it really is. I think they're going to look for one more piece on their defensive line. I think that goes under the radar because they were so excited about what this young group of first and second year players were able to achieve. They got to stop the run. They can rush the passer all day. We saw it, 9 sacks on poor Sam Darnold, who's seeing ghosts by the end of that game in the wild card in Arizona. And it is, it's very interesting because they don't lack effort and they don't lack technique. They lack size. And so I think really getting maybe one last piece in the middle of that defense could really help free up Kobe Turner to be as dynamic as we know he is. Braden Fisk, they could run more of their rush plan, run more games, so have defensive players switch each other as they pass rush to be able to affect the quarterback, but also to disrupt the run game as well so that they can rush the passer. I do think that that's an underrated area that they're looking for right now. And then they also always will need to look at right tackle. Rob Havenstein's coming back. He's in the last year of his deal. He's one of the few players left that's this veteran on their roster. He's a captain. They love him. However, he is entering the last year of his contract, and they need to find whoever their next right tackle is going to be.
Was there someone in the combine that you saw and said, this is a Ram, this is a guy who will fit in perfectly?
You know what's funny is, so I spent a year with their scouting department last year, which, by the way, lucky timing, because they absolutely crushed that draft class.
Perfect. And, it was all you, Jourdan.
Yeah, I was like, maybe they felt like someone's going to be actually writing about this, so everyone's got to like really nail it. No, but it was such a fascinating process, and that's what they say is insert player's name. Is he a Ram? And that basically means he fits the mental and the emotional just as much as he fits the physical. And I have been sort of gathering. I'm not in their scouting department this year, so I'm not dropping anything crazy here, but. Yeah. I have been sort of gathering like these little tidbits from things that, Sean McVay can't help himself. He does not have a poker face, and he kind of just drops these little clues every once in a while that he maybe shouldn't. It's how we knew Odell Beckham was signing with the team a couple of years ago, because he basically told us without telling us. I think the fact that he's name dropped Nate Scheelhaase a couple of times. Now, Nate Scheelhaase is their passing game coordinator who joined their staff last year out of Iowa State, and Sean McVay has called him one of the best young coaches he's ever been around. Like when I was doing the Athletics 50 under 40 list, I had an executive from a team reach out to me and say that they believe Nate Scheelhaase is going to be a head coach in 2 years or less. And I think that's fascinating, first of all. But second of all, there is a connection there with 2 players that the Rams could really stand to take a hard look at because Nate Scheelhaase recruited Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State, and both of those players have at least pieces of skill sets that absolutely complement Puka Nacua versus putting multiple players of the same skill set in this offense. Sean McVay has talked about wanting to run an offense that can go in a lot of different directions. They figured out their run game. They have it. But you need complementary skill players. You need complementary receivers around a do-it-all true number one that Puka Nacua will be. And I think those two players could really complement his skill set very well. Emeka Egbuka is also someone who's been matched them quite a bit with that first round pick. And I would keep an eye on the potential that this team drafts a quarterback in the second or third round this year. I would not be shocked to see that at all.
Okay, good to look out for. I like that. You just twigged me with a question when you were talking about a Rams staffer, because there has been one in the news recently, James Gladstone, who 34 years of age, my age. Here I am on the podcast, and he's now the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
What have we done? We haven't done anything.
It makes me, every year I get more insecure about my age and my achievements, Jourdan. But
Same. You know what? This is a safe space. I am right there with you.
Thank you. That makes me feel a little better. I've got one ally at least. But he's 34, looks even younger, and he's the GM of the Jags, and he's had I would say a meteoric rise as far as consideration for a senior spot like that. Did you have much exposure to James, and what can you tell us about him and his chances of, or what he'll bring to the Jags?
Yeah, I gave James a ton of crap last year because I nicknamed him. He was my tour guide through the Rams scouting department last year. So I know him very well. He was my lead point of contact, himself and Taylor Morton, sort of overseen by Les Snead as my point of contact for the year. Again, the year I spent interred with them in their meetings, on the road with them, like in their draft room, all of those things. And I was, first of all, not shocked to see that he got this job after watching how he actually worked. I was not shocked to see why Les Snead has spent so much effort trying to hide him away from the world. Like I was joking. I was like, is the real reason you don't come to the combine so that nobody can take James Gladstone away from you? But I think he's special. I think he's brilliant. I think he's kind of a killer. And because he's so young, people will not know that or see that until it's too late. And I think that he is going to overhaul over time and in a non-arrogant and non-assertive, intrusive way that disrupts it too quickly. But I think over time, he will overhaul completely the way that they draft and identify talent in that building. I think he is absolutely special. And I know a lot of people were sort of shocked seeing his age. I even saw, people who had been with the Rams in the past, nobody who's ever seen this guy do his job ever doubted this. And it's happening a lot faster than I think a lot of people would have expected, even myself. But that's also, I'm 33. So that's also my age bias coming in. I'm just like, what? Like, how dare
we're still teenagers.
Good job, James, but like, it really is. He is a remarkable football mind. And I think this is going to be really fun to watch over the next couple of years.
All right. We'll look out for that. One guy that I have to ask you about before I let you go, especially because not only is he one of the greatest players ever, but you wrote an article on Aaron Donald after your time so close to him for so long, called Watching Aaron Donald Practice and Learning Everything About Becoming Elite. So seeing him up close, what an exposure that is. We wish we could see a guy like him train. What makes him different? Why is he so different to everyone else who's played that position?
I thought it was going to be the ability, right? Because when I came in, I got these texts and it's like, I can't believe you're so lucky. Like, you get to go do, I'm like, I know, right? This is amazing. Get to go see this guy work up close. But I got this one text in particular that said, like, try to get to practice, especially training camp when we have the full access versus in season when our access is quite truncated. But it was training camp. And the text was like, try to get there as early as you possibly can and just go stand out on the field and wait. And he'll be there. He'll be there probably first. Mm-hmm. And he was, and just watch him. And he would do this every single day where he would be the first one to come out. He would be just taking his mental and kind of taking his piece before practice, sort of before he would crash into this violence of the sport. And it was the meticulousness of the details and just the tiny little hand movements and the angles he would find with opponents and in order to, like, hit a nerve the wrong way and then they're limp, and so you can swipe past them, or find these little creases or these soft spots or these weak spots to psychologically damage opposing offensive linemen. Just the little ways that he would practice these things by himself. And then, at that time, Eric Henderson, the defensive line coach, would come in and do this with them. And it just was, I've never seen anybody work like that. And in fact, I have this, the saying, and it saved Sean McVay in 2022 after he had some mental issues with burnout, and he called back to these words. And I actually have these words written out on a sign next to my bed so I can see it when I wake up every morning. And it's the phrase "work works." And Aaron Donald used to say this, and he said this to Sean when Sean was going through his worst time: just show up and work, and the work will work. And it does, and it did for him. And it was like the most profound, impactful thing, watching him be that person, not thinking anyone's watching. I'm off in the corner lurking, as I do, and just watching him show up and be the exact same elite level of work ethic every single day was absolutely inspiring. I wish that more people on the planet could have gotten to see that, and not just the exploits and the magnificent feats on game day, because to me, those parts of it were what were so life altering to me, was to draw inspiration from watching someone do that.
I might get Work Works inscribed on Musclecat Studios here for the boys tonight when they come in and see it.
You have to.
Just a bit of friendly motivation.
You have to.
All right, last thing. We actually have a principle on this show now that you never write off Sean McVay, right? You never write him off, because we got burnt 2 years ago when we said, the Rams squad's too young, they've cut too deep, and they kept 3 stars and they got rid of everybody else, and we said the rebuild they're not doing it right. What do we know? They made playoffs, and then last year they win a playoff. So we never write off Sean McVay now. So what do you think? What's an early prediction of a Rams record? Are they a playoff team? Are they seriously having a crack for the Super Bowl this year? Where do they end up?
I think they're going to try to make a run. I think they're building everything into. They exceeded expectations the last 2 years, especially with the absolute gutting of that defensive side of their roster and moving on from different stars. And I think when it was sort of a signal that Matthew Stafford has been the catalyst for this twice. When they traded for him back in 21, it was a signal to the rest of the league that these guys are going after it. And I think same thing here, agreeing to this year to year and then convincing him to do it, because that's also a factor. Like, what is it that you said, right? To say like, hey, we're going to stay closer to our number and we're going to keep you year to year, even though these other teams are offering 2 guaranteed. What is it that you say to a person of his elite, like killer mentality, to say, okay, yeah, I'm in, I'm all in. And I think this is a part of it, this signal that's kind of being sent across the league quietly, that like the Rams are going for it in 2025. I truly believe that they believe that this is their time to do that, to take that big swing. Now, what that looks like, this is the reason I keep Tums in my bag at all times. So, anything could happen ever. And all I know is that you don't doubt Sean McVay. You don't doubt Matthew Stafford ever, especially late in the season. And you don't doubt that this team, as hubristic as it is in a positive way, will try literally anything and do literally anything in order to make that happen when they believe they're in contention.
I like that. We're very excited that the Rams are coming to Australia soon. Obviously, they've had the marketing partnership with us for a while. The announcement got us all excited a few weeks ago. So we're going to watch the Rams very closely over the next year and a half. But Jourdan, thanks so much for coming on. If people want to find your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on the socials. I am also on. Okay, so let me list it off. Let me rattle off. You can go find my written work at theathletic.com. I am a senior writer. I cover the Rams a lot, but I also do special projects NFL wide for us. I am on the Heed the Call podcast on Thursdays with Dan, Mark, and my fabulous colleague Michael Sean Dugar, who does great work. And I am on with Greg Rosenthal on NFL Daily on Tuesdays in studio, usually episodes released Tuesday nights or Wednesday mornings, and have just the best time doing all of it. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a busy schedule. Thanks so much for making time for us. Appreciate it, and we'll chat to you soon.